Jersey's play-by-play home for the Eagles,
Touchdown!
Sixers,
Oh, yeah!
and Flyers.
He scored!
97.3 ESPN, WENJ, WENJ HD Millville, Atlantic City, a Town Square media station. This is Game Night with Josh Hennig on 97.3 ESPN and the free mobile app. Now, live from the Matt Black Kia Studios.
Oh, what a move!
Here's Josh Hennig.
Josh Hennig back here on Game Night on 97.3 ESPN. Of course, we have Sixers basketball last night and tomorrow night. It's a little lull in the action, so we will get in touch with Tom Moore today's show. Andy McNamara has the week off. He'll be back with us next Thursday to talk football again ahead of the Super Bowl here on Game Night. But tonight we will talk a lot of Sixers. We'll touch on the NFL stuff as well because from when the show ended last night to today, right now, as I'm speaking to you here in the Matt Black Kia Studios, there's been some news in the head coaching cycle, and we got to get to some of that as well. You can always join the conversation at 609-403-0973, and you can DM the show through the 97.3 ESPN mobile app, thanks to First Bank of Sea Isle City. Before we get to the Sixers stuff, because we got to get to a lot of stuff. Obviously, like I said, Tom Moore is coming up on the show. Longtime Sixers writer, Bucks County Courier Times sports columnist. We will get into all of that with him coming up. But I want to get to the NFL thing first, because when the news came down last night that Jim Harbaugh basically went and interviewed for the Vikings job, and apparently he and the Vikings are not on the same page. What I've heard now from multiple people now is that Harbaugh took the interview thinking it was his job. Come to find out that they were interviewing him just like everybody else. And he didn't like that too much. And that's part of the reason why he said, you know what? Thanks, but no thanks. Hey, Michigan, I'm here to stay. And I was thinking about this all last night and today, and I detailed this a little bit on Twitter. I want to get into it more now. You know, I think the bigger part of these last few weeks with this hiring cycle, and I understand the Brian Flores lawsuit is going to be the albatross that hangs over everybody. It's going to be the big cloud that makes everything just dreary and miserable moving forward until it's actually resolved. But the fact that now you have had the Broncos hire Nathaniel Hackett, the Bears hire Matt Eberflus, the Giants hire Brian Daboll, and the expectation now is that Kevin O'Connell is going to be hired to be the Vikings head coach. That means now you have multiple jobs who are all with guys who don't have NFL head coaching experience. And you now have 4 guys who have interviewed for jobs, 4 former NFL head coaches who I think the average person, whether you're listening to me on 97.3 ESPN FM, whether you're listening to me on the 97.3 ESPN mobile app, whether you're listening to me at 97.3 ESPN.com, wherever you're catching the show, you and I both know that the most qualified people are not getting these jobs. It seems that the league is becoming more obsessed or focused, or whatever you want to call it, on the new guy, the fresh guy, and it's like, what happened to the most qualified person? I talked with Dave Weinberg about this yesterday, and this goes back to last year when Nick Sirianni was hired and Brandon Staley was hired. These guys are getting jobs, and it feels like it's because these teams don't want to hire people with experience. Doug Peterson, Jim Caldwell, Jim Harbaugh, Brian Flores, all have head coaching experience. They have a combined winning percentage of 58.6. It's pretty good. Doug Peterson, 3 out of his 5 seasons in Philadelphia were winning seasons. Jim Caldwell, between his job with the Colts and the Lions, 5 of his 7 years were winning seasons. Jim Harbaugh, 3 of his 4 years were winning seasons. In the 4th year, he was 8-8. Brian Flores in Miami, 2 out of 3 years were winning seasons. Doug Peterson won a Super Bowl. Jim Caldwell got the Colts back to the Super Bowl, and he took the pathetic Lions to 2 playoff appearances. Jim Harbaugh got to the NFC Championship game 3 straight years. Brian Flores went to an organization that had been mired in mediocrity, got them 2 winning seasons, and he beat Belichick 4 times, something that had not been done for 2 decades down in Miami. All 4 of those men don't have jobs. I think the bigger takeaway from the last few weeks, and even though the headlines are going to be focused on Brian Flores and his lawsuit, and we're all going to be stuck with this thing for a while, because as the lawyers get involved, the minutia will continue, and it'll go at a snail's pace, because they're going to soak every ounce of joy and everything out of this, because when lawyers get involved, there's a lot of legal minutia to work through. But let's be realistic. The problem at this point is less about the Rooney Rule, and it's less about specifically Brian Flores. We have a problem in the NFL that if you have experience and if you have had success, you're not getting another chance. That's a little troublesome. Now, the Harbaugh situation is a little complicated, because I'm sure if Harbaugh really wanted another job, he might have been a little more aggressive in pursuing it, okay? I think the Harbaugh situation is there's obviously some miscommunication there. But for them to tell Harbaugh, look, you're getting a regular interview, and him to walk away being like, you know what, thanks, but no thanks. And he had a relationship with the new GM of the Vikings. And for them to turn around and say, hey, we're going to inform all the other candidates now that we're going with Kevin O'Connell. It's just so bizarre to me. I don't understand what's going on in this league. And I wish I could get these people in a room and have a conversation to ask them, what is so appealing about all of these guys who have 0 experience as head coaches? Because in the real world that the rest of us live in, you don't get a job without experience, okay? Let's use this situation for an example. Josh Hennig, am on 97.3 ESPN radio right now. My boss is Mike Gill. Mike Gill would never, ever give me an opportunity to be on the air unless I had some level of experience and I had some sort of credential to him to entrust me with this microphone for an hour every day. There's no way I am getting this time slot every day after the Sports Bash, previously before the Sports Bash on the warm-up. There's no way I am getting into this position unless I have experience that showed my boss that I can do this job. If you have a job out there and you want to be a manager at a bank, I highly doubt you're getting a job as a manager at a bank unless you either have other management experience or you have worked at that bank long enough in other capacities to work your way up the ladder. Why is it that NFL head coach all of a sudden is a job where these men, their highest level of experience is coordinators? Not that coordinator is a small job. It's not. It's an important job. It's a job that is sometimes a thankless job, realistically. Head coaches get so much credit, but look at Andy Reid. He lost so many coaches in Philadelphia during the 2000s. That was part of the reason why it was the beginning of the end for him, because he had so many great coaches. he lost so many guys, he wasn't able to reload some of those coordinator positions. Andy Reid is an amazing coaching tree. So, yes, you lose. Your coordinator is important. But to sit here and say that every single one of these men have zero CEO head coaching experience. I mean, even Doug Peterson had head coaching experience at the high school level, for goodness sake. These guys are going to be learning on the job. Look what happened in Philadelphia. Nick Sirianni learned on the job for months, and it took him months to learn how to handle a press conference, how to communicate properly without coming off as goofy, for lack of a better term. Sirianni had to learn everything that goes along with this job. So while all these guys are getting head coaching jobs, and everyone wants to talk about Brian Flores in this lawsuit, I can't escape the reality that Doug Peterson, Jim Caldwell, Jim Harbaugh, and Brian Flores all have been successful head coaches. 3 of those 4 got teams to the Super Bowl. All of those men have won at least 2 playoff games. Jim Harbaugh was 5-3 in the postseason. Jim Caldwell 2-4. Doug Peterson 4-2. All of those 3 men, 3 out of 5 years, they had winning seasons. Brian Flores 2 out of 3. But yet, the newest head coach of the Vikings is a former NFL quarterback and a coordinator? Something's not adding up to me. Josh Hennig here on Game Night on 97.3 ESPN. As always, you can join the conversation by DMing the show through the 97.3 ESPN mobile app, thanks to First Bank of Seattle City. You also text in at 609-403-0973. Still to come, in less than 10 minutes from now, we will talk with Tom Moore from the Bucks County Courier Times about the Sixers. Covered the Sixers for a couple decades now. And, Tom wrote a great piece over at the Bucks County Courier Times about how the Sixers are reacting to this Ben Simmons stuff. All right. And Ben Simmons is turning out to be the guy that you just don't want to have as your friend. You don't want to have on your team. He's turning out to be the guy who blames everyone and accepts no responsibility. He's the guy whose agent is not doing a good job to help him. He's the guy whose family and friends are giving him bad advice. And there was something that was said during the Woj podcast. Ramona Shelburne wrote the extensive piece about Ben Simmons, how Ben Simmons is feeling, what he's going through, and all this stuff. And there was something that was said on the pod. There's a lot of things that was said that were really interesting factoids, but I want to play this one clip from Adrian Wojnarowski, because when he said this on the podcast, it really made me perk up my ears. Take a listen.
They don't have that issue of Joel, pining at management ownership to do a deal. And I think that only strengthens Daryl Morey's resolve to not do a deal at the trade deadline and to wait until the offseason. And when he'll go after James Harden, he'll go after, any other number of guys who may become available or who may not become available. But the pool of players now, I just think the Joel part of this is really interesting. And it's not playing out exactly how many of us thought it might, because he's having a blast.
Think about that for a minute. Joel Embiid's not putting pressure on the organization to make a trade. Daryl Morey doesn't feel pressure from above or below him in the rankings of the organization to make a trade. It sounds like everyone is on the same page with this Ben Simmons situation. And I got to tell you, if that is what's going on here, then we know the real reason why Ben Simmons has not been traded. Because Ben Simmons has value around the league. All right. I understand some people out there don't want to hear that. Okay. Woj spoke specifically to that right here. I'll get to that cut in a second. But if Joel Embiid, the superstar of the team, is not putting pressure on the organization to deal Ben Simmons, then everyone's on the same page. No one is going to, behind closed doors, berate or rip anyone for doing anything. Ben Simmons will be traded, but it seems like he will not be traded before the deadline. There will come a deal this offseason that will have him move out of here. But for Joel Embiid to be having a blast, as Woj puts it, to be happy where he is right now, it tells you that the Sixers organization is a pretty good, healthy environment without Ben Simmons there. And if they're a good, healthy environment without Ben Simmons, do they really need him? I'm not saying he doesn't have value. He's a 3-time All-Star, 2-time NBA defensive first team. But if Ben Simmons, as Ramona Shelburne reports, thinks this situation is so toxic, and Joel Embiid and the rest of the team is happy without him, who's a toxic person here? The fact that Ben doesn't understand that tells you everything you need to know. All right, we'll talk more Sixers coming up next. Tom Moore for the Bucks County Courier Times joins me right here on 97.3 ESPN FM and the 97.3 ESPN mobile app. It's free. Thanks to First Bank of CLC. We'll get to all your messages a little bit later in the hour. DM the show through the 97.3 ESPN mobile app or text us at 609-403-0973.
Tonight on the NBA on ESPN Radio.
Make it 3 in a row for Reggie Jackson.
It's the battle for Los Angeles when Anthony Davis and the Lakers go head-to-head with the Clippers.
On the inline, he hit it. Davis clutched, leaned back, and knocked down a dagger.
The Lakers and Clippers. Coverage begins tonight at 9:30 Eastern on ESPN Radio.
It's the NBA on 97.3 ESPN, your exclusive home for the NBA Finals.
Matt Blatt Nissan is looking to shed excess weight this new year, like $5,000. Yep, $5,000 off MSRP on every 2021 Nissan Titan Pro 4X.
Oh yeah, it's on at Matt Blatt Nissan.
Matt Blatt Nissan needs to move trucks. Every loaded 2021 4x4 Nissan Titan Pro 4X, $5,000 off MSRP. Plus, AJ the Trade Man wants to buy your vehicle today. Get cash on the spot or trade it in and drive a brand new 2021 Nissan Kicks SV. Just $299 per month lease. Or 2022 Nissan Sentra S. Just $249 per month lease with 0 security deposits and drive away with peace of mind. Because only Matt Blatt Nissan has a 4-day love it or leave it return policy. So stop what you're doing and get $5,000 off new Nissans. Only at MattBlattNissan.com. And get equity vehicle refinance with the new vehicle. 36 months, 10,000 mile per year lease. Plus tax and $479 fee. Offers can't be combined. MSRP $60,140. VIN and N532176. Call 877-289-6670 or go to MattBlattNissan.com for complete details. Offer ends 2/5/2022. It's on at Matt Blatt Nissan on the Black Horse Pike. Egg Harbor Township.
Sure, we have 30 seconds to tell you that drivers who switch to Progressive could save big. But then what? Well, radio has been called theater of the mind, so let's tell a story with sound effects. Wow, it's like I was in the story. Almost makes me forget this was supposed to be about saving big with Progressive. Progressive Casualty Insurance Company and Affiliates.
Oh my God!
On Wednesday, February 9th,
The atmosphere is electric.
the 2 hottest live professional wrestling television shows, AEW Dynamite and AEW Rampage,
The hottest ticket in town.
make their Atlantic City debut live
Unbelievable!
at the legendary wrestling venue Boardwalk Hall.
Look at this, look at this, look at this, look at this!
The best in the world, CM Punk,
CM Punk in AEW.
Hangman Page, Bryan Danielson, Adam Cole, Dr. Britt Baker, Cody Rhodes, MJF,
Every MJF moment is the best MJF moment.
Jay, Chris Jericho, Sammy Guevara in the Inner Circle, Orange Cassidy, Darby Allin, the Icon Sting, and all your favorite AEW stars will headline this amazing night of elite professional wrestling action.
It's going to be a wild and crazy, unpredictable night, I can tell you that. Too many combustible elements here.
Don't miss AEW Live. Tickets start at $29 plus fees. Go to AEWTix.com.
The uh-ohs are out there. Scratches, dents, unexpected natural events. But with Mako and their magic, your car is no longer tragic. So when life throws you uh-ohs, just say, better get Mako, and go to Mako.com to book your appointment today.
You're listening to Game Night with Josh Hennig on 97.3 ESPN and the free mobile app.
Sixers are back in action tomorrow night. Of course, you can hear all the action right here on 97.3 ESPN. But the day in between, as Sixers play the Mavericks tomorrow night, they lost last night at home. This whole Ben Simmons thing, this season, Joel Embiid's MVP candidacy, it's certainly been an interesting year. And a man who has seen a lot of interesting years with the Philadelphia 76ers joins us right now here on 97.3 ESPN. Tom Moore's covered the Sixers for a long time. He's a sports columnist for the Bucks County Courier-Times. He joins us right now on 97.3 ESPN. Tom, how you doing today?
All right. How you doing, Josh?
I'm doing all right. And I thought that one of the things, you've been writing a lot this week about the Sixers. And when you were writing about Doc Rivers this week, I thought it really stood out to me, some of Doc's answers, because, Doc was really putting it out there like, Ben Simmons is, suggesting, or it's being said that he's saying all this stuff. And I think the way Doc phrases it, look, no one said anything to me about this stuff. And I think I just can't get around the fact, I don't think it's a coincidence, Tom, that one side is the Sixers playing well despite Ben not being here. Doc out there potentially being a coach of the year candidate, Joel Embiid, front runner for the MVP. But then the other guy, Ben Simmons, who's not here, it's being described as a toxic environment. And it just seems like, one group of people are seeing it completely different than this one other guy.
Yeah, I don't think, anybody thought that they'd be in this situation, on June 20th when they lost Game 7 at home to the Hawks. I don't think anybody could imagine that, Ben Simmons wouldn't have played as of February, whatever we are, 2nd or 3rd or whatever, and isn't injured. It isn't if he broke a leg or something like that, it'd be one thing. But yeah, this is not ideal for Simmons, and it's certainly not ideal for the Sixers. If, they have till February 10th, they have another week for the trade deadline. And, people say, and it's a fair point, with the kind of season Embiid's having, and he'll be 28 in a little over a month. And as I had a subscriber only piece talking to Doc about championship DNA and stuff. And he said, I tell the guys all the time about Embiid, he's when you have a guy that's that big and playing that well, you don't take him for granted. Every year you have with him is a gift, and we want to take advantage of that gift. But at the same time, Daryl Morey isn't planning on, quote unquote, giving him away what he thinks Simmons' value is. Apparently no one has met or come close to meeting that. So you have a kind of a balancing act. The positive is that there's no way you'd know what you know about Tyrese Maxey if Simmons were playing this year. You'd have no idea that he could be a closer. He could score a winning basket against the Memphis Grizzlies, without Embiid against the third best team in the West, as he did Monday night. So it's just got so many sides and facets to it. It's just incredible.
Before we get to the Embiid and Maxey stuff, I wanted to stick with Doc for a moment, Tom, because I have to say, he's been very candid in a lot of these pressers with you guys asking questions. And I know he's had some contentious conversations with some of the people who cover the team, but I got to say that it's a little refreshing to hear a coach be as honest as he is and not just giving coach speak for some of these answers.
Yeah, he's it's kind of interesting, as he said with Simmons, nobody supported Simmons more than he did last year. He said somebody sent him a tape that was almost an hour of all of his attaboys last season for Ben Simmons. So it's kind of ironic that, one comment after Game 7, when I think he was stunned, and he was asked by David Murphy of the Inquirer, do you think you can be a championship team going forward with Ben Simmons as your point guard. And he said, I don't know about that, which is an honest answer. And that apparently, along with Joel Embiid calling, the missed dunk, the turning point of the game, I think were the two things, at least it sounds like, according to reports, that upset Simmons the most about, the whole situation. But yeah, Doc's very good. I had a one-on-one with him on Tuesday, and, you ask him 10 questions and you get 45-second to a minute-long answers. And it's very interesting stuff about, how, like he said, the Clippers with Blake Griffin and, Chris Paul, they had talent to win a championship, but they weren't willing to subjugate their egos. They weren't willing to kind of put the team first. There was individual agendas. There were jealousies. And he said the Celtics had it in 07, 08, and he's seeing it from the Sixers more this year than last year, that they're buying in more, that they're realizing that they don't have the three superstar system, as he called it. So they need to do it as a team. And they are, for the most part, doing that and maximizing, they have some holes. Obviously, they could use a backup point guard, probably another wing. Will they be able to get one with or without Simmons at the deadline? Maybe. But obviously, if you don't trade Simmons, you're probably not going to get as high of an impact player. Can they make a real run to the, in the playoffs? It's really hard to say. Depending on matchups, they could have a tough time in the first round, or they could win a round, or, you really don't know. I mean, they went from a 6'10" starting point guard to 6'2", so that's created all kinds of rebounding issues and matchup problems and so on. But offensively, with Maxey, his ability to create for everybody else has really made a difference.
Tom, you mentioned about the Ben Simmons trade thing, and I've been saying to the audience, I understand where Morey's coming from, because I think any Sixer fan who's old enough to have a memory remembers the Barkley trade. You got Jeff Hornacek and Andrew Lang and Tim Perry for a guy who's in the Basketball Hall of Fame now. And I don't want to see Simmons get traded for that. I don't think I'm in the right mind, but the regular average fan who is just impatient, Tom, is like, no, get rid of him, trade him for a bag of basketballs. And I got to say, I think Morey is trying to avoid being the guy who makes another Charles Barkley trade.
I mean, that's true. But the thing I will say is, if you don't do anything now, and I don't blame him if he doesn't, well, then what happens in the summer if you can't get Bradley Beal, you can't get James Harden, and you can't get Dame Lillard? Now what do? You could end up settling for a package unless you're willing to go into next season. I mean, he says he is, but I don't know that, he really wants to, because you don't want to waste, and I use that term loosely, another season of Embiid at this level. So I think that's the danger. On one hand, you don't want to take a deal now that you're not happy with and find out maybe we might have been able to get Harden. Beal probably less likely, but even Dame Lillard is a possibility. So, I mean, it's a very difficult balancing act, because you don't know what the future holds. And do you want, James Harden at 37 years old making $55 million? And that could be the reality if you trade for him. So your window is going to be a couple of years, the next 2 or 3 years, but it's going to increase you've got to win. Your window becomes, much clearer, and it's not about developing young guys anymore. It's about, we got to do everything we can to win now. So that could be the way it goes. It is, it's a real dilemma. And, Morey hasn't been afraid. I mean, he's traded for Chris Paul, and obviously got Harden from OKC to Houston when he was a sixth man, and he became the MVP there. He has dealt with some, Russell Westbrook. I mean, Dwight Howard, he's traded and traded a lot of these guys. So he has experience doing it. But, the Sixers are not dealing from a position of strength, and Simmons has not helped his market value, certainly, in what's going on. And these are all probably factors in this equation.
Tom Moore joining us here on Game Night on 97.3 ESPN, Bucks County Courier Times sports columnist. You can follow him on Twitter at Tom Moore Philadelphia. Now, Tom, back to on the court. What Joel Embiid is doing is incredible. And watching him out there, it feels like he does something different or interesting or new almost every single night. And I'm almost wondering how much better can he get? Like, is this his peak? Is this his prime? Is there potentially more that could be there? Because, for a guy who's only played basketball for what, 10 years of his life at this point, it's amazing to see where he was when he first got to Philadelphia. The guy who couldn't even play because he was recovering from all those foot problems and then the back injury, to what he is now. And now he's the front runner for the league MVP.
Yeah, he's really, and I have to say, I think part of what's really helped is Rivers, instead of putting him in the low post, putting him like at the foul line or the 3-point line. And it's just opening up things. It's making harder for teams to double team him. And he's also gotten a lot better at passing out of the double team. Now, I will say, I thought last night, one of the issues was I thought he kind of overpassed. He looked for the pass more and maybe not for his own shot as much as he should. And he also, last night, I thought, was worried about contact and trying to draw fouls as opposed to going up strong and shooting. And then if you get fouled, you get fouled. He was kind of prioritizing getting the fouls, and he didn't always get them. And he's not always going to get them. But, what he's done. And the funny thing was he did not have a great game last night, 11 for 27. He did not have a great shooting night. And on the homestand, he's kind of struggled in the first half. In a lot of these games, he hasn't been as sharp and has seemed, I think he was kind of pacing himself a little bit. He had the night off against Memphis, but I think he had played in, I guess it was 21 straight games. And I don't know if he's wearing down a little bit, but he's still in the second halves was able to kind of take over. And it looked like last night, against Washington, that was what was kind of starting to happen. They were up 5 and they just kind of hit a wall and they stopped getting good shots. The offensive movement stopped and really lost a game that they should have won, Washington without Beal. But yeah, he's having an unbelievable. I mean, the more games they win, the better chance he has. They're a game and a half out of first place in the East. They have a 2-game road trip, and they come back for 4 more at home. But they play some better teams, in the next week. But yeah, I mean, last year I thought was clearly his best year, and this year he's playing better than last year. And he's also, I think a key thing is he's in much better shape. His conditioning is better. He's not wearing down late in games. He's not hitting the front rim, as he's done sometimes when he wears down. And I think that's a significant factor here, Josh.
It was only a few years ago, people were complaining, oh, Joel Embiid needs to relax on eating the Chick-fil-A and all that kind of stuff. And now he's out there and he's in better condition than some of the guys he's playing against, it looks like. And I have to think that, if Embiid can at least maintain this level of productivity and health time, people forget last year, the chunk of games he missed wasn't solely because of injuries, because of COVID. He had that stretch where he missed games because of COVID. I have to assume that if he can stay healthy and he keep producing the way he is, that potentially the sky is the limit for him, is it not?
Well, yeah, I mean, as I said, I think he can get better than he is right now a little bit, but he's doing things, with his mid-range game, with that 15-foot jumper, the Euro step and the fadeaway. You can see all the film that he watches of Jordan and Olajuwon and Kobe. Some of those shots you can see. You put him next to those guys, and you can see that he's watched it hundreds of times because he's like replicating it to the nth degree. Dribble, turn, jab step, fade. It's clear. What he's done. But yeah, I think he missed 9 games due to COVID earlier this season. And the Sixers struggled. They're 4-8 without him this year. They were 3-8 until they beat Memphis. They're a little better suited without him because Drummond can handle more minutes, whereas as the backup center, he had 23 rebounds on Monday night, whereas last year Dwight Howard just really had a hard time if he played more than like 20 minutes. He was a solid backup, but you'd have to go to Paul Reed or, whatever other direction you need to go in. But yeah, defensively, the impact he has on the games, bringing the ball down the court. I mean, he's doing things that a 7-foot, as he joked the other day, 600-pound guy they've never seen do.
The other guy who's been impressive, and he was a big reason why they won the game against Memphis, was Tyrese Maxey. And you mentioned earlier, would Tyrese Maxey be who he is now if Ben Simmons was playing this year? And it's looking more and more like the Maxey pick wasn't just a great pickup by the Sixers, Tom, but it's also looking like Tyrese Maxey might be a guy who might be an integral part of this team moving forward and might not just be a guy you throw into the trade piece.
Yeah, well, that's the thing. If you're going to get a Beal or a Harden or a Lillard, you're probably going to have to trade Thibault or Maxey, in a deal to get those guys. And that's what Daryl Morey would have to decide, because he knows you need another star. Tobias Harris is a very good player, but I think he's shown that he's not a star. He's a very good complementary player, but he's not a closer. Maxey has shown, he could, the way he can get to the basket and he's fearless. Has a little bit of Iverson in him in that respect, where he just attacks the basket, and he's 6'2". Iverson was 5'11 and a half. I'm not saying he is Iverson, but that fearlessness kind of reminds me of Iverson's fearlessness. And he's made a huge stride. He's shooting, he went from shooting 30.1% on threes last year. He's shooting 40.1%, which is excellent, which they can't stand back and wait for him. They got to come out on him, and that helps to open up his inside game. So he would be a sixth man probably, and he would be playing 20 or 25 minutes a game instead of playing 35 or 36 minutes a game. So you probably wouldn't be seeing this much from Maxey, although there were signs last year that he had this in him, but he's really had a chance to blossom and shown that he can be a very good and potentially even an all-star caliber player based on what we've seen this year.
Do you think that Maxey can be long-term, maybe not the number 2 scorer, maybe like a number 3 guy? Let's say they trade Ben Simmons, they get someone who can be the 2 guy next to Embiid. So if Embiid's the 1, you have the 2. Can Maxey long-term be that number 3 guy scoring-wise?
I think so. I mean, he's averaging almost 17 points a game this year. And as I said, his numbers are up. His assist to turnover ratio was outstanding. He makes good decisions. His defense is better. Teams will still take advantage because he's small. And that's part of the problem is you have him at 6'2", and Seth Curry, when he's healthy, at 6'1", is one of the smallest backcourts in the league. So one of those guys is going to have to cover a 6'6" wing or something like that on another team in most situations. So that's sort of the problem there. Offensively, it works. Defensively is what they kind of have to overcome. But Seth Curry's probably not going to be here, forever. Maxey, at 21, and he on a second year of a rookie contract. I think there's no question he could be the number 3 scorer. I mean, he's kind of the number 3 guy already. And to have a better number 2, I think would just help him that much more.
Tom, before I let you go, I want to ask you about Tobias Harris, because he's obviously a lightning rod for a lot of Sixer fans out there. And, to me, and this is just my perspective and everything I've heard and read, to me, Tobias's value is even more as it comes to the locker room and mentoring younger players and being that, locker room glue guy than it is him just being on the court. And I don't think the regular fan understands that or values that as much, because all they see is a box score, or they watch him miss a shot, or, they have this perception of him because of how much money he makes. And to me, Tobias Harris's value is more than just the stats he puts up. Does he need to play better? Yes. But I think that his value in the locker room cannot be undersold.
No, I don't think there's any question. He's a great teammate. He sets a really good example. He's respectful. He treats people well. He doesn't blame others and so on. But I will say, if you're making $180 million over 5 years and you're the highest paid player on a team with Joel Embiid and Ben Simmons, you need to produce on the court too. So I understand why people say that. You don't blame Tobias Harris for accepting the contract, and he kind of had the Sixers over a barrel after Jimmy Butler left. The Sixers had traded a first-round pick and Landry Shamet, some other assets to get him. So if he leaves, he goes, and you don't replace that. So they kind of had to re-sign him, and he knew that. And Elton Brand, decided to pay him just about the max. But he, as I said earlier, is a very good complementary player. And the problem is, if you had him on a 5-year, $100 million contract, people wouldn't say anything. But the fact that he's making, $36 million a year, 37, whatever he is. The numbers are pretty, as I said, it's more than Embiid and it's more than Simmons. I think that brings with it expectations, and he's not a dive on the floor guy. Typically, he's not as much of a blue collar guy. And Philly fans really like that. And he can struggle in the basket area, can over dribble some. I mean, he's got to be straight line right to the rim. When he does too much, spins, all that stuff, it doesn't work. He's got to attack, and he can be a very good. He was a borderline all-star last year. Obviously, this year that is not the case, and I guess they're getting announced tonight, the reserves. I would think the Sixers wouldn't have anybody, but certainly he needs to produce, and they need that from him, especially without Simmons. And if they don't make a major deal, if they, bring in a backup, another George Hill like they did last year or something like that, that would help. But that's not going to put them over the edge. It's going to have to be Maxey and Harris really primarily that are going to make up the difference with Simmons out.
You can follow him on Twitter at Tom Moore Philly. He is the sports columnist for the Bucks County Courier Times. Tom Moore has joined us right here on Game Night on 97.3 ESPN. Sixers back in action tomorrow night versus the Mavericks. Of course, you can hear at 10 p.m. right here on 97.3 ESPN. Tom, appreciate the time and the insights. Great stuff today.
Oh, thanks a lot, Josh. You take care. Thanks for having me.
Josh Hennig back here in the Matt Black Kia studios here on 97.3 ESPN. We'll get your guys' thoughts and comments on the other side. Of course, you can DM the show through the 97.3 ESPN mobile app. Thanks to First Bank of Seattle City, and the text board is open as always at 609-403-0973.
It's Sixers basketball tomorrow on 97.3 ESPN with the voice of the 76ers, Tom McGinnis, calling all the exciting play-by-play action.
Now Embiid for three, and that's up and good. Joel Embiid knocking down a three, and the Sixers go up.
The Sixers are in Dallas to face the Mavericks. Coverage begins at 10 p.m. Philadelphia 76ers basketball on your radio home of the Sixers in South Jersey, 97.3 ESPN.
Matt Blatt Kia has a solution to your New Year's resolution. Don't drive around in a car you hate. Trade it in for something great. So bring us any trade, no matter the make, no matter the mileage, no matter the condition, and put zero down. Pay zero interest for 60 months or make no payments for 90 days. If you're currently stuck in a loan or lease, Matt Blatt Kia can get you released. Choose from the largest selection of certified pre-owned Kias. So why make a resolution you can't keep? Trade in your old Jeep and drive away in a new Kia with zero down and zero interest for 60 months on every 2022 Kia Stinger, or make no payments until next year.
It's gotta be a Matt Blatt Kia.
Offers with approved Tier 1 or 2 credit through Kia Motors Finance. Not all will qualify. 0% based on 1667 per 1,000 borrowed. Negative equity financed into new loan. Excludes taxes, title, license. Offers don't combine. Call 877-289-6670 or go to mattblattkianj.com for complete details. Expires 2/6/2022. Matt Blatt Kia, 6211 Black Horse Pike, Egg Harbor Township, and now on Route 37 in Toms River.
Paid for by Christian Care Ministry.
Here's some great news. If you missed the deadline to sign up for health insurance, or if, like a lot of people, you just have a plan you're not happy with, you still have a choice. It's called MediShare. It's a Christian healthcare sharing program. There are more than 400,000 members now, and they love it. In fact, MediShare has double the customer satisfaction rate compared to that of health insurance. And MediShare really is the gold standard when it comes to healthcare sharing. It's been around more than 25 years. Members have shared more than $4 billion of each other's medical bills. Plus, MediShare is for you. It has saved its members billions by advocating on their behalf. Best of all, the typical savings for a family is around $6,000 a year. So if you think you're stuck with a high-cost health plan that doesn't have much to offer, think again. MediShare has a 98% customer satisfaction rating, and you are invited to be part of it. Call now. 855-51-BIBLE. That's 855-51-BIBLE. 855-51-BIBLE.
Some people are easily moved.
Wasn't that just the saddest movie ever?
Whatever. Others, not so much.
Oh, look at the puppies!
Just dogs, but smaller, so what? But even those who aren't easily moved.
Look, your long-lost brother's been found.
Oh, hi, Mike. Can be moved by us. Yeah,
We're that good. Use Clark's Moving and Storage in Rio Grande for your next local or long-distance move. Visit Clark's Moving and Storage online at clarksmoving.net.
Sure, we have 30 seconds to tell you that drivers who switch to Progressive could save big. But then what? Well, radio has been called theater of the mind, so let's tell a story with sound effects. Wow, it's like I was in the story. Almost makes me forget this was supposed to be about saving big with Progressive. Progressive Casualty Insurance Company and Affiliates.
So in life, throws you uh-ohs. Just save, better get Mako.
Go to Mako.com for an online estimate today.
Now, more Game Night with Josh Hennig on 97.3 ESPN and the free mobile app.
Josh Hennig back here in the Matt Black Kia Studios, hanging out with you for one more segment here on 97.3 ESPN. As always, you can DM the show through the 97.3 ESPN mobile app. It's free, thanks to First Bank of Seattle City. Also, you can catch all the latest on the Eagles, Sixers, Flyers, and high school sports on 97.3 ESPN.com and the 97.3 ESPN mobile app. And yes, you can also text the show at 609-403-0973. You know, a couple days ago, I wrote the article about Joel Embiid should win the MVP, and more than just because he's the front runner for the award. And, you know, I'm starting to see the new thing online, right, is there's a contingent of people who want to keep and I'm not saying they're wrong, because I understand where they're coming from, but I just can't vibe with it. And that is, there's this theory out there when it comes to the Embiid Jokic debate that, you know, we should appreciate both guys, that both guys are great. And, you know, it goes back to, you know, in the 90s when you had all these big men like Elijah Wan and Ewing and Mourning and you know, David Robinson, and you can simultaneously say they are all Hall of Famers, great players, all-timers, you know, the dominant forces of the 90s, you know, but Shaq was probably a bigger force than all of them, okay? You know, when Shaquille O'Neal was focused and when he was right and when he was doing his thing, he was better than Alonzo Mourning. He was more dominant than Elijah Wan on the offensive end. He was more of a force on both ends than Ewing was. It is what it is. You know, Robinson may have had the better shooting touch than Shaq. He may have been a better free throw shooter, but Shaq was more of an assertive force of nature that when he was focused, he couldn't be stopped. The only thing that stopped him was him sometimes, whether it was the free throws or whether it was because, you know, he couldn't, you know, he didn't stay in good shape later in his career. He had to recalibrate himself when he got to Miami and the Phoenix, which elongated his career, honestly. And to me, the same thing happens with Embiid. You know, I'm not saying that the other big men around the league are bums, okay? I'm not saying that Jokic and Karl Anthony Towns and Rudy Gobert and Anthony Davis and whoever else you want to throw in that category, you know, I'm not saying these other guys are bad players, but I'm saying that Joel Embiid is just better than those guys, okay? Elijah Wan versus Ewing. I'm not saying Ewing's a bum, but I'm saying I'm taking Hakeem 10 out of 10 times because Hakeem was the better player. Hakeem was the better force of nature. He was the more assertive player. He was the more alpha of the two. He was the guy who took over games. I'm not belittling anything about Nikola Jokic. If the dude keeps playing the way he is, he's going to the Hall of Fame one day. He's an incredible passer. He is underrated as a shooter. He's an incredible offensive force of nature. But Joel Embiid is a way better defensive player. Joel Embiid impacts the game more ways than Jokic does. Jokic is not a great defensive player. He's not. Rudy Gobert is an elite defensive player. He is a average to below average guy on the offensive end. It is what it is, okay? Dikembe Mutombo was a great defensive player, not a good offensive player, all right? So I will not sit here and just say, oh, they're all great. I'm not in this for participation trophies. I'm in here to tell you that I am going to delineate between Embiid and Jokic. The only reason why Jokic won the MVP award last year was because he was the only guy who didn't miss games with either COVID or injury. Joel Embiid missed games last season and this season because he tested positive for COVID. If you're going to hold that against him, then you shouldn't have an MVP vote. Okay? You fall into the same category as the Baseball Hall of Fame voters who won't vote for Bonds or Clemens because you either didn't like them or they didn't give you an interview. And so now you're going to say that their accomplishments are less because they're suspected of testing positive for PEDs. Okay? You're the same idiot who didn't put Jim Rice in the Hall of Fame because you didn't get along with him as a writer who now a voter during his playing career. You know, this ridiculousness when it comes to analyzing athletes and holding these strange grudges and biases against them, it's just a joke. So, you know, I'm not going to sit here and, you know, tell you that, oh, they're all great players. They're all so nice. Good for, no. Joel Embiid is better than Jokic. Jokic is not a bad player. But the fact is that Jokic being the runaway winner of the MVP last year is a sham. And Embiid should be the front runner and is the front runner and is the best big man in the league right here, right now. And Jokic is a very talented, great player, but he doesn't play defense. And Karl Anthony Towns is a super talented player, but he's still young and becoming a more consistent ball player. Rudy Gobert has no offense. He's all defense, and he can dunk the ball. Congratulations, you're 7 foot tall. I hope you can dunk the ball. You know, I'm not going to sit here and just settle for saying Embiid is just as good as Jokic. I can't do it. I can't do it in good conscience. All right, before we get out of here, I want to remind everybody right now, 973ESPN.com and the 973 ESPN mobile app, you can vote for this week's South Jersey High School Athlete of the Week. Each week we announce on Fridays at 6:50 p.m. who the winner is. Right now, the nominees over on the website you can catch are Samaj Bethea of St. Augustine Prep, the sophomore point guard, is averaging 16 points per game and 4 assists per game, helping the Prep remain as the Cape Atlantic League's only undefeated team. Jabril Bowman of Bridgeton High School, the senior power forward, has averaged nearly 20 points per game over the last 4 games, including a double-double, an important win over Middle Township. Mason Boucher, he is a swimmer for Mainland Regional. He won the 100 butterfly and 100 backstroke at the Frank Ford Cape Atlantic League Boys Swimming Championships. He's also named the event's most outstanding swimmer. Olivia Sherbin of Ocean City High School, the senior swimmer, won the 50-meter and 100-meter freestyle events at the Cape Atlantic League Girls Swimming Championships. She was named the most outstanding girls swimmer at the championships. Grace Spear of ACIT, the senior basketball player, scored her 1,000th point during a 28-point performance against Delsey. She is second in the Cape Atlantic League in scoring with 20 or more points in each of her last 6 games. And then finally, Brock Zarowski of Lower Cape May Regional, the junior wrestler, improved his record on the wrestling mat to 20-2 with 15 straight wins, 11 of them by pins. So those are your nominees for the South Jersey High School Athlete of the Week. Vote now over at 973ESPN.com and the 973 ESPN mobile app. All right, we'll squeeze in one message before we get out of here. Anonymous text comes in near the end of the show, says, Josh, you're being a homer. It's obvious you don't watch Jokic, because saying he doesn't play defense is just not true. He's become an above-average defender. Here's the problem, texter. half the league is either an average or above average defender. And I do watch Jokic. I go to bed at 2 a.m. in the morning almost every night. Okay? I probably watch more Jokic than half the people listening to my voice. He's an elite offensive player. He's an average to above average defensive player. Embiid is a better all-around player than Jokic. I am Josh Hennig. Catch you tomorrow.